These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke, and Didymus Judas Thomas recorded. And he said, "Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death." Gospel of Thomas, saying 1. I'm starting a series on the Gospel of Thomas, where I will be looking at each one of the sayings in Thomas, all 114 of them. I'll be doing a separate video on each one of them. If you haven't watched my video yet, I did a video on why the Gospel of Thomas is important. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, we're going to start at saying 1, so let's get started. Why secret sayings? Wouldn't Jesus want his message to spread to everyone? Doesn't he want everybody to be saved? Why then keep the sayings secret? Now, it might sound like something that Jesus wouldn't have said, but if we go to the Bible and we look at the Gospel of Mark, our earliest and most reliable Gospel, have a look at what Jesus says in Mark 4, verses 10 to 13. When he was alone, those who were around him, along with the 12, asked him about the parables. And he said to them, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but to those outside, everything comes in parables, in order that they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed hear but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven." And he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? Then how will you not understand all the parables?" Now, if you've got a Bible like the NIV, there will be a footnote saying that Jesus was actually quoting Isaiah 6, verses 9 to 10. If we look at Isaiah 6, it is about God being angry with the Israelites, and then he hardened their hearts so that they couldn't understand the message that the prophets were giving them. Now, when Jesus quoted Isaiah, or seemed to be quoting Isaiah, it ends with, "so that they may not turn again and be forgiven." So this is shocking, obviously. Remember, this is in the Gospel of Mark, our most reliable Gospel. And it almost looks like Jesus does not want everybody to be saved. Now, the thing is that it is possible that Jesus did not quote Isaiah, that he was simply talking about his message being secret, and that quote was then added later on by a scribe that wanted to make sense of this secret teaching of Jesus. If you haven't read Bart Ehrman's book Misquoting Jesus yet, I strongly recommend it. He goes into detail explaining how we do not have the original manuscripts, and the ones that we do have been modified, edited by the scribes, where they made changes to the original manuscripts. Now, in this particular case, we don't have evidence that this specific saying or this specific verse were added. But as explained in his book, during the first 200-300 years, when most of the changes would have taken place, we don't have any record of that because our most complete manuscripts came from much later. Now, why do I think this might have been added by a later scribe is because it doesn't really make sense that Jesus doesn't want everybody to be saved, does it? And if we go to the beginning of Mark, we will see an example where we do have evidence where Jesus was also quoting something from the Old Testament, but then we have two different manuscripts that quotes Jesus differently, quoting these manuscripts or quoting the Old Testament. So in the beginning of Mark, I'll put that just up on the screen so that you can have a look. But right in the beginning of Mark, we have evidence that the scribes sometimes changed what Jesus said because they wanted to link what he said to the Old Testament. And I think this might be happening here as well. We just don't have proof of that. But like I said, we don't have any proof of changes for the first 200-300 years when most of the changes would have taken place. Now, whether Jesus really quoted Isaiah or not doesn't matter. What matters is that it's clear that Jesus had this idea of secret sayings, things that he didn't want to just make known to everybody. Now, why would that be? I think the reason Jesus wants to keep the sayings, his teachings, secret is because he wants people that seeks the truth. In the second saying of the Gospel of Thomas that follows this one, we'll get to that in the next video. It's about seeking the truth. And I think that is why the sayings are secret. Jesus wants everybody to be saved and to find the truth. But not everybody is interested in the truth. Not everybody is really interested in following Jesus. In the Gospel of Thomas, saying 93, we read, "Don't give what is holy to the dogs, for they might throw them upon the manure pile." So it's this idea of his teachings is secret, it's precious, it's holy. Don't just throw them to people that have really no interest in really following Jesus. But the thing is, the sayings is not secret. I mean, it's on the internet. Everybody can read it. That's where we get to now the next part of the saying. It's not really about the sayings, but about the interpretation. Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings, and that is what makes them secret. Not the fact that nobody is reading the Gospel of Thomas, but it's there for anybody that wants to read the Gospel of Thomas. But it's their interpretation, what they mean, that makes them secret, because it's not always obvious when you read these parables. It's not really so much about the sayings themselves, but about the interpretation, what they mean. For example, in the Gospel of Thomas 3, we read that Jesus says that you need to understand that you are children of the living Father. Now, you can discover what that means, whether you have read the Gospel of Thomas or not. So it's not really about you need to know the Gospel of Thomas and you need to know these sayings in order to be saved. It's more about what they mean, their interpretation, and you can get to that meaning or what they mean in different ways. It's not only through the Gospel of Thomas. It's also about whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings. It's about discovering, not simply hearing what they mean. You can't just listen to someone else's interpretation of the saying. So why are you listening to this video then? The thing, or why am I making this video? The thing is, it helps if you listen to other people's interpretation of a saying. I've read a couple of books on the Gospel of Thomas, and they do help me, that they helped me come to my own interpretation. But it's important to get to your own interpretation of these sayings. If we go back to that example of Thomas 3, where Jesus says, you need to understand that you are children of the living Father. Now, that will mean something different to everyone. What it means to you will have a lot to do with who you are, your personality, your circumstances. And you need to discover what that really means to be a child of the living Father. You can't just simply read that from in someone else's book. You need to discover that, make that discovery on your own. You need to make that interpretation your own. And that will be true with all the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas. Let's have a look at the last part. You will not taste death. Now, what does that mean? We will not die. Well, we all will die. The thing is, if you are a child of God, then death is not final. It is simply you moving on to be with your Father. Now, that does not mean you will not be scared. Everybody will be scared when they are faced with death. Even Jesus was scared before he was crucified. But it's not just about dying. It's not just about physical death. It speaks about a deeper kind of dying, something that you can experience while you are still alive. In Thomas 11, Jesus says, "The dead are not alive, and the living will not die." You see, death, you can experience death, you can taste it while you are still alive. Death is decay, it's lack, despair, chaos. Death is when hope rots, when relationships wither, when you are broken and divided within yourself, when life has no meaning. That all is death, and you can taste that when you are still alive. On the other hand, if you discover the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas and what they mean, you will see that it is all about becoming whole, about being undivided in yourself, about healing. It's about purpose, your life having meaning. It's about being prepared. Jesus gives us practical instructions on how to be prepared against this world, spiritually, but also physically, because this world can sometimes be harsh and unforgiving. It's about being free from the control of others, about discovering the kingdom of God. All the sayings in Thomas helps us to have a life that is not void of life, but that is full of life, full of hope, joy, and not being alone, being with God. It's about discovering the kingdom of God that is inside of us and outside of us, that is here and now. Saying one in the Gospel of Thomas, it's almost like a movie trailer. When you watch this trailer, you think to yourself, I just have to see this movie. And that's what Thomas saying one is. It's a trailer for what is coming, the rest of the 114 sayings. And it is something that you just have to discover. Thank you for watching.